What's up, everybody? It's your favorite nerd, and you're back for another episode of The Last Word. How's it poppin'? Hey, I haven't been around for a bit. I've been busy. My senior year at university started up. You can kind of still hear it in my voice. I'm getting over a cold or whatever's going on. And to be honest, we're dealing with a product that's been pretty damn unwatchable as of late. So, first things first, let's do a little housekeeping. We've had 2 pay-per-views come up. Both weren't bad. The one in Australia was really nothing more than a glorified house show. Now, I wish it was treated a little more seriously, but I think when you're on an international location, you're kind of doing things differently just to entertain fans that really only get a show once every couple of years. I couldn't tell you the last time they've been to Australia. It's probably been at least 2-3 years now. However, again, a house show, for those of you that don't know, just means an untelevised event. This felt like a pay-per-view that really was just normally an untelevised event. The Hell in the Cell pay-per-view that was on before that wasn't bad. A couple sloppy matches. There was a botch in the Randy Orton and Jeff Hardy match where Randy rolled off the table about a minute too early, so when Jeff finally jumped down and fell through the table, it was kind of humorous. But overall, that was a really good match. AJ Styles and Samoa Joe have had a fantastic feud. That was a good match. The Miz and Daniel Bryan had a good match. Unfortunately, their match at the Australian show kind of sucked. And my one complaint with the Australian show, other than the Miz and Daniel Bryan match being way too short and rushed, was you had the whole Triple H and The Undertaker the last time ever, which is nonsense because they're having a tag team match at the Crown Jewel if that doesn't get canceled, which we'll get to in a moment. But it was almost a 30-minute match for essentially watching my dad wrestle. That's not a knock on my father, but these are both guys that are well past their heyday. Both can put on a good match, but you can't bank on nostalgia in lieu of booking correctly. Like actually allowing the performers to do their own matches and kind of get away from scripting everything out and improvising and actually putting on a hell of a show. And not that Triple H and Undertaker did bad, it's just it dragged. It honestly did. It was nice seeing Triple H and Shawn Michaels back, and of course they're now doing a tag team match, DX versus the Brothers of Destruction, as now Mayor Glenn Jacobs, aka Kane, is going to be going to Saudi Arabia to wrestle in November. And we're going to talk about that Saudi Arabian situation because this is part 1 of at least a 3-part series, State of the Union, what's wrong in the WWE right now, because as I mentioned, the product's been pretty damn unwatchable. And I've said that on my last couple pay-per-view reviews. Raw and SmackDown have been boring. I'll get into that in a second. I have one more piece of housekeeping to take care of. You might be asking, where's my intro? Now, I found it cringy to sit through it. I can't imagine other people didn't either. I thought it was a good first effort to do something that I wasn't going to get nailed with a copyright strike every time I uploaded a video by YouTube, because go to hell, YouTube. So I want to redo something. I want to try to make it a little better. So no intro for the next couple videos until I figure out what I want to do there. But again, this is part 1 of at least a 3-part series, as I said. Today I'm going to talk a bit just about what's going on and kind of the signs or indications of that there is a problem. And then the next 2 parts are going to go more into what I believe the problems are. And that's going to dwell on how specific wrestlers have been booked along with creative, and what's wrong with NXT when they call the guys and gals up, because they're all kind of related to booking. And of course, part 2, when I talk more about booking, I'm going to go into more about certain wrestlers who I'm going to mention briefly as part of the main problem, and how they're overused or not used correctly or not written correctly. But so you might be asking initially here, well, Alan, loudmouth on the internet, what do you mean they have a problem? It's the WWE. There's no competition. They're the only game in town. They just got a $5 billion deal a couple months ago with Fox. Well, smartass. What I'm going to tell you And this just got reported, I believe, Wednesday or Thursday this past week. WWE, their stock for the last year and a half has been skyrocketing. It was at about $91 a share up until a week or so ago. In the past year, a lot of their executives and their people higher up in the chain were using their stocks to sell it and essentially mortgage their house, pay off their house, buy cars, and do other things, actually enjoying themselves. Well, a $9 drop in stock within a 3 to 4 day span causes a massive financial hit. The WWE stock was at about $91 and some change a share, and it dropped down to about $82 and change a share. So it was a $9 drop in a matter of a few days. Across the board, that's $1 billion lost due to just what's happening right now. And a lot of this is stemming from their upcoming pay-per-view called the Crown Jewel in Saudi Arabia, which is I'm going to get to in a moment here. But first, along with the $1 billion they just lost, attendance in pay-per-view arenas is down. And the big hit, and where the problem is television viewership. This year alone, WWE has had their 5 lowest ranked episodes of Monday Night Raw in the 25-plus year history of the program. Now, you would think when your lowest would be from when you first start. Usually when a new show starts out, the pilot will be heavily viewed, and then you'll see 4 or 5 episodes in, it drops a little bit, and then as the show gains steam, it comes back up. Well, no, it's wrestling. This has been American pastime forever. So when Monday Night Raw first started, it skyrocketed. And even when WCW was relevant, and you had the Monday Night Wars of the mid-1990s, their viewership was still higher than what it's been. Here, this past Monday was their 3rd lowest rated show in the show's history. Back in, I believe it was August, they had their lowest show ever. And that's coming right around the same time as one of their 4 core pay-per-views, which was SummerSlam. So things aren't always good here. I was trying to think of a phrase to use there. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. There, that's what I'll go with. But in everything with the TV is just a mess. Because if you want to take into context just how far down, in 2016 they were averaging a 3.9 Nielsen, 3.9 million viewers a show for Monday Night Raw. And that's between all 3 hours, because it's essentially since forever, hour 1 and 2 of Raw is usually higher watch, and hour 3 drops almost in half. And this year they've had a 30% drop, so they went from a 3.9 average in 2016. So over to 2017 it went down, and then 2018 we're at a 2.3 to 2.6 average right now, and that's a 30% drop from what it was even just a year ago. And they're dropping to only around barely over 1 million viewers in their 3rd hour, which again, I think sitting through 3 hours of wrestling might be a bit much for in a TV viewer, especially when you've created a sanitized PG-rated product that's designed to go after a younger demographic, which makes no sense to me, because really your fans are older people, people that grew up watching the product. But, it's their decision as a corporation who they want to target and how they want to target. And again, I'm going to go into that in a minute, because that's also playing a role into, I think, what's causing issues. Another big problem right now, and I mentioned the Crown Jewel pay-per-view. There was an incident, and I don't know all the details of it, but there was a journalist who went to, who's high profile, something political. I'm American as hell when it comes to geography, so I'm not going to pretend I get everything that's going on over there. Other than Saudi Arabia, government-wise, they're kind of ass backwards culturally. Pardon my French. The people are cool. My brother-in-law's best friend is Saudi Arabian, and I've gotten to know the guy a bit, and he's absolutely awesome to hang out with. Omar, if you ever get to watch this, brother, I miss you. And Fareed, you too, bro. But, so it's not the people. I'm not knocking the people or anything. It's just those in charge are trying to keep the country in a few centuries in the past. I mean, hell, women just got the right to vote this year. Not right to vote. That would be a step up if they had elections. Women just got the right to drive this year. So, we're not talking about the most progressive, cutting-edge country. We are talking a country with a bunch of rich oil barons that run the place and have an extremist view of their theology that they're projecting on the rest of their people. So, tensions are already high in that part of the world. This journalist suddenly went missing. So there's political pressure from everywhere, from the right, from the left, from international communities to not allow the WWE to have this pay-per-view event. Now, this will be the second one this year they're doing in Saudi Arabia. They did another pay-per-view, the Greatest Royal Rumble is what they called it, back in May. And I'm not okay with going. Granted, it's a lot of money. And there's the chance of really showing different culture, different things like that, and influencing the leadership in that country by being there and putting on a show. But I have a problem when you went and did this in May and you weren't allowed to bring any of your female wrestlers because they were banned. And instead of having integrity and saying no, and granted, that's kind of hard when you're getting a $20 million payday just to show up. WWE basically scheduled a women's pay-per-view, only women's pay-per-view. It's the first time they're ever doing this. And I think this might be the first time since the days of Glow. And he has some of the smaller women's wrestling leagues that, I'll be nice and say that they're gimmicky. The other ones, Glow was a legit, it was gimmicky, but it was really the first time that it was the show that women can have their own wrestling show. And Glow was Glamorous Ladies of Wrestling. And there's a great documentary on Netflix, as well as 2 seasons of a well-done, albeit creative license, a lot of creative liberties on this show. Like, they had a cocaine-dealing robot. So I can't take the show necessarily too seriously, but it's a well-done show. And it's about, loosely based on the history of the first all-women's wrestling federation. But, so I'm cool with WWE doing the pay-per-view. I'm not cool with the fact that you're not doing it to be progressive or evolving culturally. You're doing it as I'm sorry for throwing all your women to the gutter to get a $20 million payday in Saudi Arabia. And they're doing it again here in another couple months. So that's why they're having the women's pay-per-view. So I think the Saudi Arabian thing is hurting right now because there are, on social media, a lot of people are threatening to cancel their network subscription, which is the WWE streaming service. So that, depending really how this goes, because it's not as simple as, hey, sorry, we don't agree with what you're doing, we're not coming. They signed a contract. There's a lot of legal proceedings involved. So I don't know what the right answer is in that. I wouldn't have taken it to begin with, but I'm also not in their situation where I'm being offered $20 million. So that is part of a big issue of what's hurting them right now financially. Overall, though, let's go, as I'm going to keep this one short because this is part 1 of at least 3. Things that are hurting the product right now. The PG era. I don't think this was a bad thing because you came off of the Attitude Era, which was really crass and it would not fly today with our overly sensitive, we'll go with sensitive for lack of a better word, culture that we're in. Then you had the Ruthless Aggression Era, which I think got a little over the top with the violence. And then he went full circle with going completely PG. And this coincides with Linda McMahon. Originally, she went into politics here in Connecticut, lost. But she went from running a company where in the 90s, you had a female wrestler literally kiss your husband's ass. And you had a wrestler whose gimmick was sexual chocolate knock up an elderly woman who was wrestling for some reason. And then she gave birth to a hand. So this translates to, I'm a conservative businessman or businesswoman. And again, I'm not knocking ideology, so this isn't like, oh, conservatives, blah, 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 or oh, liberals, blah, blah, blah. I'm an independent. I think both are nuts. So I'm not going to go into one or the other. Y'all do you. I agree with things on both sides, but this is not a political podcast. It's a wrestling podcast. I mean, how could I go political? Who would take that seriously? But the PG era where it's overly sanitized the product. And by sanitized, I mean wrestlers are not allowed to be their own character. They're given handwritten promos with really corny dialogue. Like, you had a wrestler actually say suckering succotash in a promo, and it was just like, literally, you can't even defend the product to people that think you're stupid for liking wrestling when stuff like that is being read on live television. You got rid of the part of the PG eras. You got rid of kind of the intergender matches. Like, it was cool in the 90s when you had, like, the female bodybuilders actually wrestling the guys and holding their own. China was huge in, huge, I guess, double entrande there. She's a big muscular lady, but she also held her own against male wrestlers. I remember when she beat Jeff Jarrett for the Intercontinental title, which was something that you never would have seen coming. So you don't have a lot of that now, because now we're afraid to actually, despite screaming that everybody's equal, we're afraid to show that. And again, because you're trying to have a more child-friendly product, and it's kind of hard to explain to a child that, well, he's not really hitting her. They're coordinating and doing this stuff together. Don't punch your little sister. We also live in a culture where parents are morons and don't pay attention to their children. So I understand that one, but there was a promo 2 weeks ago on Monday Night Raw, because if you don't know, there's the Mixed Match Challenge, which is intergender wrestling, but it's basically like if the guy tags the female in, the other guy has to tag his female partner in, and vice versa. And it's done on Facebook, of all things, because essentially boomers trying to figure out how to use social media to make money. It's not being watched. It's got poor ratings because it's on at random times, and they don't do a good job of actually promoting their Facebook stuff. But you had a wrestler named Finn Balor, who's Irish, who's awesome, and you have Bayley, who's from San Jose, who watched some of my older content. I want to root for her, but they've destroyed her character with how poorly they wrote her character. She comes off as just a friendly, dumb country bumpkin, and I can't take her seriously. And she's super sweet. She sells tons of merchandise for young girls, so they're going to put her in the spotlight. And she gave such a super overly saturated, sweet promo that my comment on my Twitter, which is the last word 2016, for those of you that want to follow, my comment was, I think she gave my diabetes super diabetes. It's just, let these people have personality. Let them have, like, some edge. Like, I don't need edgelord, mopey, emo wrestlers. But for the love of God, can we have personality? Besides, I'm bad guy. I'm good guy. You know, let them actually take what you're giving them and do their own thing with it. And I'm going to get more into kind of how they book certain characters in the next part. So we got the PG era. We have some of the financial stuff going on. And I'm trying to think of anything else here that's a major red flag. Oh, the way they're doing the title scene. And this one I'm going to cover more in part 2. But I'll mention it here in part 1 since this is the introduction, and it makes no sense to leave out what I'm going to talk about in the next parts for you. As this one I'm going to keep short, so we're almost at 20 minutes, and I just want this to be a quick intro for everybody. But for a year, you've been let me set it up, with Brock Lesnar as Universal Champion. It got leaked after WrestleMania in 2017 that you were going to have him as champion, unbeatable, and then have Roman Reigns beat him the following year in 2018 at WrestleMania. This got leaked, everyone knew it, everyone was pissed, everyone voiced their concerns that they don't want any more Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns right now is what Vince McMahon, I don't know, he has some weird fetish for big oily guys. I don't know what his deal is. But it's the guy he wants to be the next big thing. The bulk of the fans have rejected this. You had Hulk Hogan, you had Stone Cold, you had The Rock, and you had John Cena. And he wanted to repeat the formula of having the one central guy by self-appointing Roman Reigns as the guy. The thing he forgot with the rest of these is the other guys I mentioned, the crowd liked. And for a while, I think Roman had good sales, and even I think merchandise is still selling, but it's costing you views. You had multiple pay-per-views where this guy was the main event. The crowd booed and walked out. Your crowd walked out on your main event. And I don't mean one or two people. I mean, there was video footage on YouTube of people by the hundreds just walking out during this main event. You're doing something wrong. You're failing your product by refusing to adapt. So, Roman basically didn't win it at WrestleMania. To the WWE's credit, they actually did throw a curveball here, but they still went the same damn route everybody knew they were going to go. So now you have a guy that people don't want with the belt, and you're not going to allow the people that the crowd are behind to get the belt. So you're punishing your audience, treating them like they're stupid. Why am I going to tune in to Raw when A, the belt's never defended, which they solved that problem by getting it off Brock Lesnar, and B, we already know who your guy is and who you're trying to shove down our throats against. So guess who's not losing the title? Guess who now has no interest in watching the product? So, and it's not all Roman. I could simply just say, well, every problem right now is Roman Reigns. It goes beyond that, but that is a problem. And I'll go further into kind of the history with that in part 2 here. But yeah, that's my introduction. The WWE is hurting financially. They are hemorrhaging viewers. Now, I should say they took a hit financially, rather. I mean, they're the only game in town. They can lose $1 billion and still, that's a tax write-off type of thing. And I think that might be part of it, and I'll cover that maybe in one of the other videos on the lack of real competition. There are other federations and things out there to put out quality, but they're not big enough. So yeah, let's say that. Lack of competition, credible or threatening competition, rather. This sanitized PG era, because politics. The complete tone deafness with doing 2 shows now in a country that has a horrible civil rights record. And the other one, that's what I wanted to mention here. I'm going to talk more about this in the next video, but part of the other issue is Stephanie McMahon, Vince and Linda McMahon's daughter, took over as running creative. And I'm not blaming her in particular, but part of their move was they hired Hollywood writers to write for the show. And it's apparent. Wrestling is meant to be this live product. It's not really, as much as it is in reality, really pre-produced, and there's a lot of production to it. It shouldn't be obvious to the viewer that there's production. There shouldn't be fancy cross dissolves between shots during the match. I shouldn't have interviews and things that feel like they were written by somebody who wrote for As the World Turns or General Hospital. They brought in creative people that in any other situation, any other environment would probably spin gold from straw, but in a wrestling environment, they're spinning crap from straw. So the creative aspect of it, I think they just gone completely wrong direction. You've tried to up production value, and at the same time, you've taken a live, really aggressive product and made it feel really overly produced and bland. Wrestling has always been quote-unquote fake, although I've covered that a million times, so I don't want to rehash it. It's not fake as in, like, these guys are hurting each other. It's scripted. Ideally, when you're doing a power bomb, you're putting your opponent's safety into consideration, and you're doing the maneuver in just the right way to not hurt them. Because there's no way to fake jumping off the top rope with your elbow and landing on the guy. You're still going to hurt him or your arm. The idea is not to accidentally kill or cripple your opponent or yourself. So fake isn't the right word, but let's say scripted, predetermined. That would be the right word here. So it's always been kind of a production, but you've turned it into where it's blatantly obvious. It's theater. Theater's no longer theater when it doesn't feel live, when it feels like it's directed and polished and really just sterile. It becomes a movie, which, okay, maybe that's a bad analogy, but wrestling's missing the theatrics, the live feeling, the reaction, the anything, the improvisation. That's the word I want. It feels too scripted. So between kind of the tone deafness with Saudi Arabia, the stock drop, the viewership hemorrhaging, again, I got a 30% drop over a year and losing almost close to half your viewership in the last 2 to 3 years. there's clearly a problem. And then the next couple podcasts here, I'm going to go further into what's causing the problem, and possibly I'll do one more after the next couple to say what I would do to fix it. But I want to thank you all so much for tuning in today to The Last Word. I'm Alan. On behalf of Chocobo Chokeslam, I want to thank you for tuning in. And as always, in case you haven't heard, I always, and I mean always, have the last word. Peace out. Take it easy. Enjoy the rest of your day, night, or whatever the heck you're watching and listening to this. Stay tuned for the next couple of parts of this, and peace out.